You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud, what women are actually talking about on Monday, the 30th of September. I'm Holly Wainwright.
I'm Leah Freedman.
And I'm Jessie Stevens.
And on the show today, Ellen DeGeneres is back. And according to the reaction, she's either glossing over the impacts of cancellation or she's playing the victim. We unpack. What is a dumb job, and is it the most sought-after professional situationship of our era? And can you feel it? Female sexuality is so hot right now. The books that are proving female gaze erotica is big business. But first, Mia.
In case you missed it, camel toe has a new name, and it is vulvar cleavage.
Oh.
In a piece written for Fashion Journal this week, writer Hannah Cole is suggesting that we reclaim it. She writes, "When you hear the words camel and toe, what is your response?" Jessie. No, my response is Jessie.
Oh, I thought you were throwing to me.
No. I'm just saying that's my response. She goes on, "Do you shudder repulsively? Do you instantly look down, stretch the length of your jumper beneath your crotch and think, please, not me? Defined as crotch cleavage on Urban Dictionary." Oh, it's got another name. "The camel toe is an unfortunate and sexist rite of passage for many females." And she goes on to argue, interestingly, that men are revered for the bulge in their jeans. Remember those paparazzi shots of John Hamm walking down the street?
Yes. And we shame women. And this
Male
is your
dancers.
own internalised misogyny.
It absolutely is. So why, as women, do we need to pretend that we have a Barbie lack of genitalia
I've only been saying this
situation going on down there?
Entirety of this podcast.
I know. And Out Louder has referred to a pair of tight leggings as punani parting pants.
Because I think now it's seen as cool. So I think that the camel toe or the crotch cleavage or whatever we're calling it, punani parta, is now to be celebrated. There are lots of pictures of celebrities, famous trend-setting celebrities showing off their
So, Jessie, you know how they say a stopped clock is
right.
right twice a day? Finally, you're in fashion with your vag.
Yeah. I've always been a bit ahead of the curve. And my thoughts are, it's like you're weird. You have a thing about panty lines. You have a thing about
very 90s, isn't it, of me?
Yeah. You police a lot, I would say.
She polices women's under regions a lot.
A lot. And it's like, firstly, stop looking. And secondly, are we shocked that Jessie has underpants on? Are we shocked that Jessie doesn't have a mound? No.
What's
Jessie
true, because if you
bits.
didn't have underpants on, I'd have some concerns about your situation and some chafing, and also you would have a more pronounced camel toe.
Yeah, I'm actually proud of my bits. I wear them proudly and I like a pair of tights.
I think I'm chastised.
Oh, I know
you're next.
I'm worried about what Mia's going to wear tomorrow.
I am. Oh my God, you're so right. Because I've been searching for the leggings that have like an extra lining so that you don't get it. But now that I know that it's in fashion,
well, there'd just be period leggings. But I mean, I'm worried about are you getting a UTI from the irritation?
It's just not. You're not a doctor, and that's not a thing. That's not a thing.
It could be.
But you're going to come in tomorrow with your camel toe.
Yeah. Or if
flying.
it's fashionable,
I'm
on board.
Exactly.
All right, well, let me catch up on what's been going on with me since you saw me last. I decided to take up gardening. I got chickens. Let me see what else I can tell you about that's been going on. Oh, yeah, I got kicked out of show business.
Over the weekend, I watched the new Ellen Netflix stand-up special called For Your Approval. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was funny and clever. But there was one thing I felt it was missing. Let's start at the beginning. It's 2020. And a tweet goes viral. It reads, "Right now, we all need a little kindness. You know, like Ellen DeGeneres always talks about. She's also notoriously one of the meanest people alive. Respond to this with the most insane stories you've heard about Ellen being mean, and I'll match everyone with $2 to the LA Food Bank." Now, none of these stories were verified, but they included Ellen asking people who were sitting in the front row of her show to move to the back because they were unpleasant to look at. People who allegedly worked for her said they couldn't look her in the eye, she wouldn't smile or say hello. But then came a series of BuzzFeed investigations. Dozens of employees, current and former, described a toxic work environment with a culture of racism, fear and intimidation. There were also allegations of sexual assault perpetrated by the head writer. Interestingly, Ellen barely features in the employee complaints. So two things become conflated: the allegations of a toxic work environment and also Ellen being mean. A few celebrities even come out and say Ellen being mean is a true story and any issues on set come from the top. That came from the guy who played Robert on Everybody Loves Raymond. Like, people piled on. Ellen apologises, which everyone tears to shreds. Ratings decline by 43%. And then in May 2022, after 19 years, the Ellen DeGeneres show is literally cancelled. And that was almost 2.5 years ago. Then this weekend, she drops her Netflix special, For Your Approval.
Here's the problem. I'm a comedian who got a talk show, and I ended the show every day by saying, be kind to one another. But I became a brand, a one-dimensional character who gave stuff away and danced every day. Had I ended my show by saying, go fuck yourselves, people would have been pleasantly surprised to find out I'm kind. Yeah, the first I heard about it, I came across a headline that said how Ellen DeGeneres became the most hated person in America. Now, I didn't see the other names on the ballot, but it's an impressive title. It really is. It's a horrible thing to say about somebody, and to make it worse, there was no trophy, no awards banquet, nothing. Just the title. Just, I made a sash at home and I wore that around just to feel like I had something, It was quite a shock to me because for 17 years, there were all these polls basically saying I was one of the most trusted people in the country. There was a poll that asked people, which celebrity would you most want to babysit your child? And I was the number one answer.
You can hear how beleaguered she is by it. Like, you can hear how, obviously I identify, but she's been through all the stages of cancellation, the realising it's impossible to defend yourself against the things that people want to believe about you, even if they're not true. The idea that you apologise, but then your apology is somehow used as a weapon to beat you with further and is ridiculed. And then you realise that the only thing you can do is completely remove yourself.
Yeah, which is what she did for years and years. And this is my worry about how the cancellation cycle, whatever you want to call it, it's sort of like a set in motion thing. There's a script. And I'm not saying that Ellen didn't deserve criticism. She likely did. But the scale of what she faced would have been soul-destroying. She refers to therapy, to not knowing what to do when her show was cancelled. But ostensibly, she's standing on stage upright, telling funny jokes, and she does seem fine. And then the narrative goes, Ellen's fine. There's no such thing as cancel culture. And that's how we justify the vitriol we throw at public figures next time.
Like, she's got a Netflix special.
Yeah.
She looks happy.
And like she never really truly atoned. And so we're only ever seeing 5% of the story. And my question is, how do we represent the other 95%? And is that even a problem? Is this just we see people publicly when they're doing better?
I'm not sure what the problem is here because she has come back and she's talking about her cancellation.
She's come back and talking about her cancellation.
Sorry, that was a silent shrug. The listeners couldn't hear that. But that was me saying to Jessie, very unprofessional, I have learned that you should use your words out loud when you're on a podcast. She's come back and she's telling her experience of that time. And that's fine, as far as I can understand. It's been generally well received. There are snipey people. There are some publications and some writers, obviously, for whom whatever Ellen says, does, whatever, she's just done to them. And there are some people saying, she isn't apologetic enough, she isn't this, she isn't that. But what I'm seeing is a woman coming back and telling her story. Yes. And so I'm not really sure what we're missing.
Okay, so the thing that I think that she's missing is that because it is a comedy special, everything needs a punchline, right? This isn't an interview with Barbara Walters.
But she is promoting it too.
Yeah, she's promoting it. And she says, I didn't think I'd ever be able to joke about this. But now 2.5 years on, I can make some jokes. My worry is
that we didn't see her when she couldn't.
That what we didn't see was a woman who lost her job, who would have been, and I think I'm personally invested in this because I have known people who have had the weight of public opinion turn against them. And I know that the extent to which they're not okay can't even be communicated.
Agreed.
And I just worry that, and she's not the only example, Aziz Ansari did the same thing. They disappear, they come back, they tell a few jokes, they're smiling. And it's
What do you want them to do? What do we want from Ellen? Because I liked her last special too, relatable. She's, in which she talked about the criticism she was receiving at the time that, oh, you're too rich, you're too famous, you're not relatable anymore. It was very funny. She said, I tell that to my butler all the time. Like, she's great at taking the piss out of herself.
Yeah.
She is a woman with an extraordinary story. She has faced so many things in Hollywood. She was originally cancelled literally for who she is, for her sexuality. Then she went on to build one of the most successful TV shows that has ever existed, and she hosted it for 19 years, and it made her unbelievably wealthy and powerful in Hollywood. Her famous friends always stood by her. On her last show, Jennifer Aniston was there. You know, Oprah's always around, blah, blah, blah. What do you want from her? You want her to show you her, like, literal scars?
No, I don't think it's that. I just think that what we've started to do is when we do get the apology from Ellen, which she tried to do in the moment, we just yell louder to shut up. So every PR crisis manager says, hibernate, shut up, turn it all off, which is probably true, right? But I'm just saying that the result of that is that we can never properly convey. I just don't think that essay has yet been written, that book has yet been written about what it is like for those 2.5 years. You just see them when they're recovered, which I've said before about mental illness, about addiction, is we often don't talk about it in the throes of it. It's this recovery narrative that is actually not very honest.
There's a couple of reasons for that. And what you're pointing to is the sanitization of what it feels like to be cancelled, because either you don't come out and talk about it, or you have to come out and talk about it in a way that's still very submissive, deferential, apologetic, humble,
vague,
or funny. Like you have to make a joke of it. And in terms of how the comedy special's been received, I've just watched the beginning of it and I thought it was really good too. But the Guardian headline, for example, no apologies and not particularly funny. Ellen DeGeneres' shameless return to stand-up. Hang on, let me just check notes. What did she do again? She was rumoured to have been a little bit rude to some people, and also she oversaw a culture where bad things happened. But, you know, when you look at what men get cancelled for versus what women get cancelled for, you know, there's someone else who's in the news this week, the ice baths guy, who's
Wim Hof.
Wim Hof, who is this kind of Russell Brand-style guru. Russell Brand's another one. His former wife and children have just come out and accused him of heinous domestic violence and abuse over decades. You know, so you look at what men get cancelled for, I don't even know if he's been cancelled, versus what women get cancelled for. Variety's headline, Ellen DeGeneres lets herself off the hook in self-indulgent Netflix special. I'm not sure what they want from her. They don't want what you're suggesting, Jessie, because the rules of cancellation is that you have to apologise, and everybody has to say that your apology is not good enough, you're not holding yourself to account properly, and that it's not sincere and that it's written by PR people. So no matter how you apologise, it's always not good enough and it's wrong. So then you just have to be quiet. Like you literally just have to be quiet and assume the fetal position until the mob gets bored of kicking you or starts to see so much blood that they, you know, go, oh, okay, we'll move on to our next target. Because if you do show pain, it's worse. Like at my lowest...
You're playing the victim.
Yeah. At my lowest moments, like so many people who've been cancelled, I went to a very, very dark place. You can imagine how dark the place was, right? And part of me not laughed, but thought, oh, if that happened, the headlines would be, Mia Freedman still doesn't get it, makes it all about herself. You can't show anyone your pain.
There was an element of her acknowledging it and kind of going, oh, what's been happening? I got some chickens. Oh, yeah, I was thrown out of Hollywood. And she alludes to some pain, but that's not a punchline. It's not what she does.
I can hear in her voice how she has been completely obliterated and defeated about it. Because what's really strange is that when you defend yourself, people are like, oh, well, it must be true. And if you don't defend yourself, people are like, oh, well, it must be true. And if your friends come out and defend you, that makes it worse. And if they don't come out and defend you, oh, it must be true.
And the thing is, if she just disappeared, right, and she never did this special, which she didn't have to do.
It's a farewell special.
It's a farewell. She says, like, I wanted to come out. I wanted to be beloved. Like, I wanted to end on that. Of course I care about your approval. It's why I'm in the industry.
But that's a hiding to nothing. She is beloved, right? The theatre is full. This is a hit. She is rich. She is popular. She is famous. She is beloved. But you will never, ever win those people over that Mia's talking about who would gloat if something bad happened to you, because those people have written you off. As you always say, Mia, the word cancel is so brutal. They've literally drawn a line through her. trying to win them back is a hiding to nothing. Why would you try?
I'm wondering if there's a different way to tell this story, because there are arguments about whether anyone gets cancelled and then someone gets a job again or they work again. The rule is you're not really allowed to talk about what happened. You don't want it to come up in the news cycle again. And with Ellen, like even if she got to this place, I just don't think there's any way to represent, like being called the most hated person in the country and then sitting there with a therapist and going, every publication in the world is saying how hated I am, and not because of a professional faux pas, but because I am a mean, bad person.
Yeah.
Like,
it's your humanity being questioned. Not that perhaps you made a mistake. And, it's all flattened. So the Iceman and Harvey Weinstein and Ellen DeGeneres are all put in that same
by whom? Because they're not
bucket.
I agree. So it's very hard to have this conversation without sounding like I'm saying, oh, Mia, your pain, Ellen's pain, who gives a shit? That is not what I mean at all. I think cancel culture of this scale is abhorrent. But what I don't understand is, are you saying that everybody should be above criticism? Because the thing about Ellen's story, what has happened to her is horrendous, and I don't doubt for 1 second that she suffered exactly what you're talking about in the depths of it. I really do. But she is probably more well insulated against this than you can imagine a lot of people would be, right? She didn't lose her livelihood. She didn't lose all her power and influence.
She did lose her livelihood.
Well,
she was already very rich.
Worked $500 million.
No, but that's very different.
And
she
also,
lost her whole. It is different. Like, yes, she's very rich, but she lost her show.
But what I mean...
And that's what she did for a job.
Her show was already on the way out. Like, the daytime boom had gone. If you don't lose 43% of your viewers because they've switched or decided you're not a nice person overnight, and if they do, your popularity was built on a lie. That's the problem with this. And that's what she's making the joke about, right? Cancellation stings the hardest if it appears to reveal a person that you are pretending to be, right?
She starts the show in a really funny way.
I used to say that I didn't care what other people thought of me. And I realize now, looking back, I said that at the height of my popularity. Hey, if I look older than when you saw me last, it's because I'm older than when you saw me last. And also, I stopped doing Botox and filler. I used to do Botox and filler back when I didn't care what other people thought of me.
I entirely understand how horrific this has been, but one of the things that I struggle with here is if we say that even the most privileged and wealthy and, beloved person in the world, it should never be revealed that there is anything dodgy about them, that working for them is awful, that if they're one of these awful men, we shouldn't talk about what happens to the people in their lives because awful people on the internet will jump onto them. That's where I wrestle with this. Is like, so are we saying no criticism ever?
No, let me finish. I'm saying I'm interested to know what you think is the difference, genuinely, between criticism and cancellation.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I hear you say, we talk all the time about this stuff, and Mia will say, so-and-so is getting cancelled today. And that'll just actually mean that they're getting some criticism online that will be gone tomorrow. Ellen really was cancelled. Yeah. What you were talking about your own experience, Mia, I will never forget, even being close to you while you were going through that. And that is horrific, and I never want to sound like I'm devaluing it. But every time somebody says something mean about somebody on the internet, they are not being cancelled. And every time somebody points out some hypocrisy, that is not cancellation. And anytime somebody says, hold on, why are you trying to make me buy this thing that you're selling me that's fake? That's not cancellation.
No, I agree. There's a difference between criticism and cancellation.
I think the difference is glee. I think it's glee that characterises a pylon and characterises cancellation.
I think it's
and
language.
Also virtue
I think
signaling.
it's also language. I think the specificity of a criticism because you work in a toxic workplace and you're someone who isn't paid a lot and you've experienced potential sexual assault or even you had a rude encounter or whatever, you have the right to tell that story. But when you get a headline from, I think it was the New York Times, saying Ellen DeGeneres is the most hated person in the country, I think the New York Times needs to look in the mirror.
I agree, but I also think, and I might be being naive, I think this was peak of this culture, right? This was peak cancel culture time when Ellen was caught up in that. And indeed, the story that you're telling me, I'm not sure cancellations are as brutal or as long-lasting anymore. And I think one of the reasons is there's a certain type of person, and funnily enough, they all seem to be men, who actually take that cancellation, twist it, and capitalise from it. As we've discussed on this show before, Louis C.K., I'm sure it hurt his feelings a great deal, and he felt awful when everyone was calling him a sexual predator on the internet when it was revealed that he liked to reveal himself it was revealed that he revealed himself.
Which he was.
Exposing himself to female comics and writers who worked with him. That has now made him a dangerous baddie in the world of a particular kind of male comic, and he sells out arenas. And people say he's cancelled. Like, to me, that's not cancellation.
I think a lot of...
you have to lose something.
Yeah, a lot of publications as well are now invested in Ellen's downfall, and I think that they're defensive because they know what they said 2-3 years ago. And so I saw this headline, I think it was from Vulture, that said Ellen DeGeneres' Netflix special has 70 applause breaks. The snark inherent in that. I was like, I watch a lot of stand-up comedy.
That's the point of them.
If I sat down and counted how many applause breaks were in Dave Chappelle's stand, it would be more. So there's just this snark that they can't let go of. And in terms of you saying, Holly, you need to have lost something, I think my point is, because we only ever look at this story in retrospect, we're not able to truly see the things people lose. There isn't full transparency because the second that you put your hand up and say, hey, I actually lost X, Y, and Z, everyone goes, you're not the victim here.
Mamamia out loud!
I Just Want a Dumb Job is the headline for a piece by Charlotte Coles that appeared on The Cut this week. And it starts, you got your dream job. Congratulations, except it sucks. The hours are terrible, the pay is bad, and your shiny title doesn't make up for the stress and drama. You secretly start to envy your friends who you used to make fun of, the corporate sellouts who clock in, clock out, and get paid. What does it feel like to realise that everything you thought you wanted in a career is actually a mirage? And she goes on to speak with 3 women who talk about quitting glamorous jobs that they fought hard for, but how they're now much happier on the other side with different kinds of jobs. And when I first read this headline, I Just Want a Dumb Job, I thought that it was referring to menial jobs or like jobs that were like physical labouring jobs and that weren't like high-flying, glamorous jobs. The article itself is a little patchy because a couple of them just sort of have bad job experiences and then go and get different jobs. But there's one woman called Beth from Boston. She was previously a bakery owner. She dreamed of starting her own business, closed her business after the pandemic, obliterated it, and she's an operations manager for a food and beverage distributor. And of her new job, she says, it's not glamorous or creative or exciting to tell people about at cocktail parties, but at least now I get to go to cocktail parties because I'm not working all the time. My income is stable, I make a decent living, I get health insurance and paid time off, and I work at a computer instead of being on my feet all day. I'm not sure I'll do it forever, but for now it's perfectly fine and I don't have to overthink it. Hol, how would you define a dumb job?
First of all, we have to acknowledge that that term itself is a little problematic. I mean, because I think there'll be a lot of people who are like, hold on, don't call my job dumb just because it doesn't suck up every moment of my day.
I don't think it's about the job itself. It's about
your approach to the
job. I get it. It's just that I think that term is deliberately inflammatory, which is fun. I think it's entirely relatable because, as we've discussed before, work culture has changed so much. You used to be able to have a relatively high-level job with a lot of responsibility, but when you walked out of the office, you walked out of the office. And not that long ago, a little more than a decade ago, that used to be a reality. If someone wanted you out of hours, it was like calling you, God forbid, faxing you, like something. But generally, work was work and home was home. We know that's all gone. And for some people, that works fine and has offered a lot of flexibility. For a lot of other people, it's swallowed so much of their life that what they really mean, I think there was a couple of quotes in this that were very clear about that when they said, I want a dumb job. I just want to work for someone else and not have to be on my toes all the time and not think so much. I'm sure that that's a very good criteria for it. And then there's the woman who had kids, and she said, as I've gotten older and had kids, my professional objectives have shifted. I want to earn as much as I can with the least amount of soul-sucking drama. And that is also something that I think is intensely relatable.
I translated this to mean I just want a job.
Yeah.
That's it. Just take the dumb out. Yeah. I just want a job.
Not a career.
No.
Even if it's a career, but I want a job that is what I do for work. It's not who I am.
It starts and it stops, and I don't go home and, as you say, ruminate over every little thing. And I was thinking, I had a few friends who worked the council election, which is not a dumb job, but what they were saying, and they're teachers usually, Monday to Friday, and they went and worked this massively long day with the community and just could not stop raving about how much they loved it. And I think it was mindful. It was straightforward. They knew that when it was finished, which is the opposite to what teaching feels like right now.
What did they have to do?
So people would come and then they would have a quick conversation with them, give them a form, answer some pretty straightforward questions if they had any, point them to a booth, amazing. And they just went, I am so probably burnt out by what I'm doing Monday to Friday. And it also made me think about a bit of a mantra, I think I've talked about it on the show before, that I've had in regards to work, which is maximum engagement, minimum emotional investment. And what that means is that you're super engaged when you're there, like as engaged as you possibly can be. But the emotional thing, just try and leave that at the door.
Don't start your own business.
Exactly. Oof. And that's why I think that sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah, I'm exhausted because I've had that for 17 years. That's one type of person who can be really burnt out by their job. But you don't have to long for a dumb job or a simpler job just if you have your own business. I think for me, a dumb job is about a job I don't have to engage with when it's not working hours and that I don't have to think about, I don't have to angst about. We asked out louders what they thought. We had some great examples. We asked them if they could relate or if they've ever had this idea of a dumb job. And Petra said, I had a job when I was 17 transferring seedlings into punnets. Nothing to think about during or after the job apart from not squashing the plants, and I was alone, so I did not have to talk to anyone. It was blissful. Emma said, the downside to knowledge work, we are not well designed to execute cognitively demanding tasks for 8+ hours a day. I was meant to pick berries.
Oh, yes. So true.
Interestingly, it's very easy to idealise someone else's job, right? It's not to say that a dumb, in quote marks, job is easy. It's not about how much it pays, because it could be physically exhausting. There was a really interesting quote in Out Louders from Nicole. She said, people think my job as a kindergarten teacher is easy, but the mental and emotional toll, I don't, as well as how physically demanding it is to work with 3 to 5-year-old children, I burn out pretty much every year. I used to work in a bakery. Standing on my feet all day was physically exhausting. It didn't have the emotional load of my job now, but it is just as tiring daily. Being a mum can be physically exhausting, but you also have a huge mental and emotional load to carry. And she says every job in its own way takes its toll on you.
100% it does. I think the thing that's interesting is that with this sort of pushback against hustle culture and the fact that we've now had nearly a generation of seeing this new kind of work that never leaves you alone because you're constantly contactable, is lots of studies have shown that young people don't want to rise the ranks for that reason. The great unbossing, I think they're calling it, which is that Generation Z and younger millennials are saying, I don't want a promotion, I don't want to manage people. And there's a real dearth of middle managers because they're like, that just looks like more stress, more drama for not really that much more money. And there used to be a lot of status in that, but now there's a lot more status in having a job with boundaries.
It's work to live, not live to work.
There was a great article in the Sydney Morning Herald recently by Shade Zarai. She says that before you think about quitting, consider adopting this 85% rule. So this is basically how to make whatever job you're doing into a simpler job. And she says that basically never work above 85%. If you're
Mia's not going to like this.
No, it's actually smart. Actually, she doesn't say never. What she says is your default should be 85 so that you've got more to give when it needs it. If you're burnt out because you're 100 all the time.
Should you get paid 85% of your salary?
Oh, my goodness. I don't think jobs are asking for 100% of us 100% of the time.
No, and that's one of the things that I learned a long time ago is that no one is giving 100% all of the time. It's just not possible.
No.
So you will always, if you have a group of people who you manage or who work for you, there will always be some of them who are working at 50%, some of them who might be working at 100%. Most people will be working at around 85 or 80%. Like, that would be great.
Yeah,
that's good. And it averages out.
You know what you get rewarded with when you're working at 100? More work, probably, and not always more pay.
Out Louders, continue the conversation about the idea of dumb jobs and what one means to you, either in the Out Louders group or on our socials, wherever you find us.
Want unlimited Out Loud access? We drop episodes every Tuesday and Thursday exclusively for Mamamia subscribers. Follow the link in the show notes to get us in your ears 5 days a week. And a huge thank you to all our current subscribers. don't want to get too personal with you on a Monday afternoon, but when I was a teen-ish person, I stumbled across a sex book that blew my tiny little mind.
Didn't we all, Holly?
Didn't
we all? Why were they in our house? I think that it wasn't an accident that they were left.
What was the one that we stumbled across?
It was called The Secret Garden. It was by Nancy Friday, who is a feminist writer. And it was published way back in 1973, and my friend's mum had it under her bed. How did we find it? Not clear. I don't remember. Did we hesitate to read it? Not even for a second. The book's tagline was simply women's sexual fantasies, and it did exactly what it said on the tin. It was a collection of anonymous, or maybe fake names, I don't really remember, but stories written by women about what they fantasized about, and it absolutely floored me and my friend. We were shocked. We thought it was hilarious, and I guess on some level we must have found it titillating, although I don't really remember that at the time, but I'm sure it changed me on some profound level. What was most surprising about it, and even now when I think about it, was how honest it was. There were what we would now term inappropriate fantasies, for sure. But every word in there was from the female imagination.
How can a fantasy be inappropriate?
Exactly. Well, because it poses things that are illegal / violent / you know what I mean? Things that you probably wouldn't want to happen to you in real life.
Which is kind of the point of the fantasy, that it stays in fantasy form, right?
But it was all from the female lens, and I'm sure that had an impact on me. And not only me, it seems, because right now, one of the best-selling books of the moment is another collection of female fantasies compiled by Gillian Anderson, who we all know from The X-Files, from Sex Education, from The Fall. She is a very sexy woman. And she's
also very accomplished. Don't objectify her.
Oh, but I mean, this is relevant to this part of the story. She's written a book called Want. Well, she hasn't written it. She's compiled it, and it's the same thing. So back in the day, Nancy Friday actually literally put an ad in the newspaper that said, send me your sexual fantasies. And women wrote her letters, and she put them in the book in 1973. In this one, Anderson's publisher created a portal online so that they could reach a diverse global audience and received enough stories to fill 1,000 pages. They're separated out into themes like kink, strangers, power and submission, those kind of things. Women are also obsessing at the moment over All Fours, Miranda July's Hotter Than Hot award-nominated book about a midlife protagonist who describes her sexuality as more mind fucker than body fucker, and the unbelievable, enormous success among women of books like Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses series.
Is that the fairy smut?
Yes, which are described as an erotic adult fantasy series. All of this points to the fact that right now we're living in a big moment of female erotica and everybody wants a piece of it. Jessie, excuse the pun, but why are our inner sex lives so hot right now?
Well, I was listening to an interview over the weekend between Esther Perel and Miranda July. I've just finished reading All Fours, which was outstanding. Weird, but outstanding. And Perel pointed to the distinction between the erotic and sexuality, and I had never heard that before.
I often think that modernity has reduced eroticism to sex. And that in the mystical sense of the word, eroticism has been about aliveness. It involves sexuality, but it is not the most central element. Eroticism is what gives sexuality meaning.
Right.
You can do sex and feel very little. I make a point of saying sexuality and eroticism, two different things.
Yeah.
Sexuality is the pivot, it's the basic instinct. But eroticism is sexuality transformed by the human imagination.
What I took from it is that we live in this hypersexualized world where there's, you know, women's bodies being objectified all the time and people are in bikinis and there's flesh and there's sex scenes.
Porn,
but it's devoid of the erotic. And therefore, a lot of what we see panders to men and their desires.
Like close-ups of holes.
Yeah.
Things going in and out of them.
It's not how, for most women, their sexuality
So is erotic
works.
and erotica, is that a specific thing?
Yeah. So what it said was that the erotic can happen without sex or sexuality, and sexuality or sex can happen, as every woman, and I'm sure every man knows, with nothing mildly erotic about it.
That's so true.
Isn't it true?
Yeah.
And so the erotic, you can have incredibly erotic experiences with people where you don't even touch, right? That it's something that goes on in your head. And the erotic is also seen as life. It's life-giving. And so
it's a life force, Esther Perel describes it as.
It's about energy. And I think that there is this shift. It was funny, I was speaking with friends recently who are having so much sex because they're reading this Fourth Wing thing, which I think, I don't know.
Very smart.
I
think there might be dragons. And they're all having so much sex. And they were like, what I need is the 200 pages before the thing. I need to have
that was 50
the context.
Shades, right?
Yeah,
you need the
same
context.
And I don't want the grabs and the little bits. I need the whole story. And I thought as well that this moment historically is very significant. So Nancy Friday's My Secret Garden, that came out the year Roe v. Wade was decided. Now this book has come out a few years after it's been overturned. And for women, historically, sex has been used as punishment, as something synonymous with responsibility, as something synonymous with consequence.
Shame.
And shame in a way that it isn't for men. And I think these stories are more important than ever before because even the title is want. And the reason why our desires are so transgressive is because in life, women often say what they want and they're not listened to or they're shamed or they're ignored. And that's why in most of these, Anderson has talked about it and she's like, most of these women have never told their partners these fantasies because they're too ashamed and they think, well, they wouldn't want to listen anyway. So there is something so feminist and empowering about actually just saying what you want or what you fantasize about.
I don't know if you need to say it. Sometimes what makes it erotic is that you don't say it and that it lives in your imagination, you know?
And that it's yours.
Yeah. Like we recently did a survey that showed 49% of Australian women aren't happy with their sex life, which is a lot.
It's a staggering number, but I wasn't surprised.
No, I wasn't surprised either. It's interesting. You talk about The Secret Garden. My childhood was formed by the Height Report, which came out in 1976 by a woman called Cher Height. And it was, again, questionnaires of women. There were about 3,000 women responded, aged 14 to 78. And there was some statistical analysis in there as well. But most of the book was women just telling stories, opinions and complaints relating to their sex lives. And I remember my mum had it. It's so funny when I think about the books that I discovered as a kid and the impact they had on me understanding about sex and sexuality. My mum had the Height Report. My dad had Penthouse. And I found the forum letters really interesting. And my brother, my teenage brother, had The Story of O, which was like a French erotic novel. And interestingly, this is all before porn. This is so different to our children because their first experiences of what sex is will not be the written word.
They
will be
have to look under the bed.
Close-ups of bang, bang, bang and things going into places that they didn't even know they could go into. And so there is no erotic. Like for this generation coming up, I wonder how eroticism plays out to them because particularly for girls, most of the porn that they will be exposed to will be through a male lens and to pander to men, like those close-ups of orifices and stuff.
And they're the object, not the subject.
Exactly. That's why often straight women like lesbian porn because the woman is at the centre. The female experience is at the centre. And so, yeah, it's interesting.
Well, the thing is, though, is that those teenagers are reading all those TikTok books. Book Talk, any publisher will tell you, is basically about smut. Right? So not just the fairy stuff, but all the sort of, I can't remember what they're all called now. There's like the Icebreaker and all these books that are selling lots and lots to young kids are all rude.
Wasn't Colleen Hoover have a lot of sex in it?
I think she had a little bit.
But she's more trauma. But like, so dirty in inverted commas books are still speaking a lot to young girls. And I think it's interesting because we also have much more of a societal focus now on fantasy, masturbation, sex toys than we certainly did when we were young. And I wonder if one of the reasons why we're sort of having a real moment, because this sexual fantasy moment is, you know, Miranda July and stuff is about midlife women, and you could argue that Gillian Anderson's book is too, but it's kind of broader than that when you do bring in all those books that are doing really well that are basically just smut, to give it its nice title. And I wonder if it's because
smut's such a negative word, erotica.
Well, I don't think it's a bad word. I think it's a sexy word.
You're bringing it back like vulva cleavage.
Yeah, but like women and men we keep reading in lots of ways have never been further apart. Like lots of culture studies are showing that. Young people are having less actual sex. All the studies show us that too, despite it being easier to get than ever, probably, because you can dial it up quicker than a pizza. It's because of the nature of all the porn that feels aggressive and scary. And that's giving, young men maybe really intimidating ideas about sex. So you can entirely understand why fantasy, whatever your age, is safe. Like fantasy, even if your fantasies aren't safe, fantasies don't disappoint you. They're selfish. They're about you. They don't make you do things you don't want to do unless that's what you want to do. And they don't scare you. And they don't just leave nothing in it for you. So fantasy, in a way,
doesn't cost you anything,
is probably having a really big moment because the real sex is getting more disappointing. And when I say real sex, I mean of the traditional kind. We control fantasy. Like women of all ages, they control their fantasy. And that's very appealing, I think.
When I was in magazines, I remember in the 90s there was a big boom in erotic fiction. This is pre-50 Shades. And that was massive. And that was just around the time when safe sex and the AIDS epidemic was really scaring people about sex. And it's no accident then as well that the rise in erotica for women came at a time when sex was potentially life-threatening. And so it's interesting that that's happening again. We announced at our upfronts recently when we were going around and discussing all the things we were going to do next year at Mamamia. We are launching the first Australian audio erotica podcast. So Butter are central stories. So it's like audio erotica essentially.
Is it women's fantasies or are they ones that we've written?
Both.
Oh, wow.
So we're asking people to send them in, but also there's some that we've written based on the research we've done into what women want what women fantasize about.
What you don't want is to not have – well, you got your headphones in, but they've not connected to Bluetooth. And you press play and it's like, and then the throbbing and you're like, no.
We played a bit at our upfronts in this like room of like hundreds of corporate
Not
advertisers.
how it's meant to be listened.
It was funny. Out Louders, what are your fantasies? Just kidding. Oh, you can tell us if you want. You can tell us if you want. What are you reading or listening to? Or maybe you are into porn. Maybe you like some wham bam, or maybe you found some porn where there is plot. I remember one time discovering that one of my kids had been watching porn and I went into long detail telling my husband about the plot. And I'm like, I was worried that the plot was inappropriate and there was a power imbalance. And he just laughed and he went, I don't think he's watching it for the plot.
They're not following the
for
plot.
the story. Outlouders, if you enjoy listening to this podcast, it would mean so much. Well, I hope you do. I mean, God, if you're listening still at the end of it and you don't like it,
we're so sorry.
Stop it. Just stop being a masochist. Turn us off. But if you are still listening because you do like us, we have a favour. If you could just do 3 things for us, we're going to ask for 3. First, can you please follow or subscribe to Out Loud? Because following the pod helps you never to miss an episode and it helps us because you never miss an episode.
To do this, you just have to go to the Out Loud show page. That's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen, and just tap the little plus symbol. That means that you follow us. It is the most important thing for the pod.
Or click on the word follow, depends on the app.
Yep.
While you're there, give us a 5-star review. We only really want 5 stars, thank you, but 4.5, would we accept it?
No, it's fine.
5-star review and a rating, and share the episode with a friend. We'd be very, very grateful to have even more friends in our ears. And a massive thank you to all of you Out Louders for listening to today's show, and of course to our fabulous team who help us put it together every day. We're going to be back in your ears tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye. Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and you want to support us, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do so. There's a link in the episode description.